All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Rolling Over 40 podcast. Today's guest is my cousin, Dan Whelan. Dan has a wrestling background since he was very little. He started when he was really young, and then he started learning Jiu-Jitsu as well a little bit later in life. And then he got into law enforcement, which he continues to do to this day. And I must say, he is part of definitely, actually, probably a pretty big part of the inspiration for me to even start jujitsu. So, welcome to the podcast, Cousin Dan. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. So, yeah, first of all, real quick, how old are your kids now? I don't even remember.
So McKenna is about to turn 11 in May, and Quinn just turned 7. So then
Okay.
I have my stepdaughter's 24. So big range
Okay.
there, and all girls. Very
Oh, all
lucky.
girls. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, stepdaughter who's 24.
Yeah.
So, you said McKenna's about to turn 11. Oh, so she's the same age as my daughter because
Yep.
Maya's 10. And
Yep.
then my boy is, he'll be turning 12 in a week from today. So,
Okay.
yeah, you guys are just
Wow.
behind me. So awesome, man.
Yeah.
And, and how is, what are they into? What sports and stuff are they into?
McKenna is a big into speaking of martial arts, she does a lot of karate. So she's into the Kenpo. So she's been into that for about 3 years. She's testing for a new belt tonight, actually. So she's going for like an advanced purple belt, I think it is at this point. So,
Okay.
and she's played soccer. She's a little softball. She's not really into that anymore, but and she loves basketball. So basketball is kind of her favorite sport. And
Okay.
Quinn loves like everything so far. She's playing softball at the moment. She likes soccer a lot and dance, and she is wrestling actually. So
Oh,
she
I was
started
about
wrestling.
to
So
ask if wrestling
yeah,
or jujitsu was a part of their, activity. So wrestling,
yeah.
and do you plan to get either one of them into jujitsu, or is that just up to them?
I would love to. Ideally, we'll see what happens, but um, it would be certainly once McKenna finishes her karate tenure, and if she's in like a black belt program, so if she's able to get to that point where she finishes, and hopefully she'll kind of continue with the kempo. My hope is to transition her to a little bit of jujitsu and like diversify her that way. Get her. I mean, the benefits would be extraordinary. So nothing against the karate. Like it's good. It's fine. Like the striking's is decent, but it's not at the level of like the jujitsu is just like it's the best of the business in terms of martial arts, in my opinion, especially for kids and what's going to bring to the table in life. So
Yeah. No, see, just hearing you say that already, I'm like, because you've got a very unique perspective about all this being in law enforcement and having the wrestling background. So for you to make the statement that you just made about jujitsu versus pretty much everything else, you're saying it's the best of the martial arts, and you would put that in terms of self defense and just all that.
yeah, I mean, I would put it. I don't put it ahead of wrestling. I'm not willing to say that, but I would say, and wrestling. I mean, we lump it into the martial arts. I don't think it's
Hmm.
technically really a martial art, but it might as well be, right? So, it's it's right there. I would say grappling in general is the best. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think it's if you're going to have one, that would be the one to have, right? So it's going to give you the most diverse skill set. It gives you the ability to control somebody on their feet and to control them on the ground. And there's really no other martial art where you can do both, right? So
Yeah.
that's what it gives you, and it's tested, right? Like it's vetted out. Like you can't deny that wrestling or jujitsu is it doesn't bring it to the table because it's been proven over and over. Particularly when you look at MMA and stuff, and obviously it's the prevailing technique and skill set to use with law enforcement, and I think the military and such now too, because they know that it's like tried and true at this point.
Wow, yeah, that is a hell of a plug for jujitsu right there. I got and wrestling. But you said
Yeah.
I did hear you say you wouldn't put it ahead of wrestling necessarily, but you said if you had to pick one, that jujitsu would be the one, right?
Yeah, I think in terms of like self-defense overall, I would say probably jujitsu because it gives you the the opportunity to kind of end the fight. You know what I mean? A little bit more
Sure.
with just wrestling. Like you could end the fight, but you're gonna have to kind of wing it in terms of like, and I'm talking obviously if you had to be in that position, you know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
So like,
Yeah.
but if you're gonna end the fight in a wrestling match, like you're probably gonna end up doing some kind of hasty ground and pound unless you're trained in
Okay.
that, you know. So
Yeah,
like you
yeah.
can't pin somebody in a real fight. So,
Okay.
but I mean, you obviously you'd have a huge advantage against an untrained person in terms of the takedown and the control. But you get into like a legit street fight. It's nice to be able to know how to choke somebody and how to do a kimura, and it's
Okay.
nice to be able to have those tools to end it if you had to, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So let's back up a little bit, man, because I definitely want to get into all those details. But first, let's talk about your career started with wrestling, and you were did you say that you were 4 years old when you started wrestling?
Oh no, fourth grade.
Oh,
Fourth grade.
fourth
So
grade. All right.
yeah, I was whatever, 9, 10 years old maybe at the
Okay.
time.
And for context, for our listeners who don't know, um, your older brothers, Tom and Brian. Now, did they like for I'll be referencing Tom and Brian throughout the episode for our listeners, and they are your older brothers, my
Mhm.
cousins. So, were they into wrestling before you? Like, did they start it or did you start it?
No, I think at the time, so Brian he was more into hockey at that time, and
Okay.
so Tom and I started at the same time. Tom was a little older than me though, so he was probably in like sixth grade, seventh grade at that time. So that was so we started at the same time, but obviously he was a few years older, so he was then. And then Brian did end up wrestling competitively for about 2, 3 years total, and that was in high school. I think that was it. And he was kind of in and out, so he wasn't as consistent as Tom and I. But once Tom and I started, uh, we both wrestled all the way through, uh, middle school and high school, and
Yeah.
then Tom played football in college, and I chose the wrestling route. So
Okay. And how did it go? Like you were like as a wrestler in middle school, high school, college, you're
mhm.
competing this whole time, right? And I don't really know much
Yeah.
about wrestling and how it goes, but there's like and hold on, this is Massachusetts, right? Not New Hampshire, right? Or was it New
Well, no,
Hampshire?
we actually by this time we were born in Massachusetts and lived there for when I was in first grade. Actually, for me, we moved to Maine, so this is in southern Maine. So
Oh man, dude, I can't
yeah,
keep track, dude.
yeah, yeah,
Man, and the
yeah.
states, it's so funny because the states are so close to each other out there. It's like when you say Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. I mean, we're talking just a couple hours drive
Oh
from one
yeah, yeah.
another, right?
Actually, Woburn. So it was maybe an hour and 10 minutes from here. So or from
Okay,
where we
all right.
grew up. So yeah, so it's you're right. I mean, it's close. I mean, I'm where I grew up in Maine, which is right at the southern tip of Maine. We're only an hour north of Boston, and where I am now in Goffstown, New Hampshire, is an hour north of Boston the other way. So it's
Okay, so you're in.
s-
Sorry, you're in what city are you in right now?
Goffstown, it's called.
Goffstown, New Hampshire.
Yeah, and that's
Okay,
just west of Manchester. So
okay,
most of your listeners, or it seems like, or I guess I should say your guests have been
yeah.
California folks, so they're not going to probably have any idea where Manchester is, but
No,
but
no
it is
clue.
it's the largest part of New Hampshire. Not it's not saying much, but that's
Even me, I've been. I visited you. I mean, we visit Massachusetts what once a year or whatever
yeah,
it is in Maine for the weddings here and there, and I'll see you at what Scott's wedding and then
yeah,
what Chris's wedding and all that. And I know one's in Maine, one's in New Hampshire, one's in Massachusetts. But once I land in Boston Logan and we drive somewhere, yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything. I don't know where we are. I don't know where you are.
yeah,
I don't know the difference between Maine and New Hampshire and Massachusetts and all that. So
yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
even me, I've been there so many times. I don't really know. I don't have a picture in my mind of what we're talking about. But so
yeah,
hold on. Middle school and high school, you were in Maine or New Hampshire.
yeah. Maine. Yeah, during
Okay.
that time. So I was in Maine. Really, all of this wrestling was Maine. Because we can lump it
Okay.
in, except for obviously college. But
Yeah.
so yeah. So in Marshwood High School was where I graduated.
Okay. And how was your wrestling career in high school?
High school was was great. I mean, really, once I started wrestling as like a young kid, I started. I didn't even. I had no idea what I was getting into. I was obviously super young, right? So, but I thought it sounded cool. I actually thought it was going to be like WWF at the time. Like I was like, oh
Oh,
yeah, like I can. Not like obviously not entirely, but I thought it would
right.
be. I thought it'd be closer to that than what it actually was. So, like I was,
Well, that is,
you
that
know,
is wrestling. So, did you when after
yeah.
you got into wrestling, were you maybe thinking I'm going to transition into that kind of wrestling? I
No,
get
not
no.
not after that. No.
Okay.
So it started out. It's that I kind of got my ass handed to me the first year I wrestled. I only competed in two tournaments. I think I lost all four matches. I remember that. And then going into the ensuing years after that, which is finishing elementary school and then into middle school, I pretty much like turned the page immediately from there. Like that second year of wrestling, I kind of came out and just started winning, and I was winning pretty much almost every tournament, except for maybe one or two for the year.
Every
And then,
tournament. Damn, dude. And like how many people like I don't know anything about wrestling. I don't really know much about wrestling. So like what's the weight classes like at least in high school and whatnot? Like do you remember what weight class
yeah,
you were in, things like that?
yeah. So in high school, I started out at 103 pounds,
Mhm.
and then the weight classes go from like 103 to 112, 119, 125, 130, and that goes
Okay.
all the way up to 275. Now that's recently changed, but that's the way it was at the time that I was there.
Okay.
So I wrestled 103 as a freshman, and then I had to cut weight to get to these weights. I really wasn't 103 pounds, but and then by the time my sophomore year, I got hurt. So during the year, I hurt my
Okay.
knee, so that
Okay.
kind of derailed me a bit. But I
All
was
right.
at like 125 already that year,
Okay.
and then 135 as a junior and 140 as a senior.
And you're already, I mean, when you talk about cutting weight, it's crazy for me to think about cutting weight as like a high school student, to be that serious
Yeah.
about it. But I mean, all I know about wrestling, or I guess not all, but I mean, most of what I know about wrestling is from that movie Vision Quest with Matthew Modine in like the 80s. Do you remember that movie?
Oh yeah, I love it. Great
Okay.
movie.
All right. Great. So,
Oh yeah.
so is that, are things like in there, is there some accuracy in that movie about wrestling in high school?
Yeah, I mean, I would say certainly the overarching like generalizations they kind of make in there, like the weight cutting and
All right.
that like the way Loudon Swain, his
Loud and
character in
Swain. That's
that,
right. Yes.
his character, the way he was cutting weight and everything, like that's all completely legit. Putting the sauna suit on and
Wow.
running, and
Wow.
that whole thing was definitely real good. I mean, some of the depictions of the wrestling was a little bit like they just kind of lock up in one big throw and a pin and it's over, sort of
Okay.
thing.
Yeah.
Some of the
Yeah.
matches, like obviously they dramatize that a little bit,
Yeah.
but definitely like the culture I think was in there at a
Yeah.
decent
Yeah.
level.
Okay. And so I'm curious, so you were winning all these tournaments and then you had that injury. So,
Mhm.
I mean, a big curiosity for me is that, you're not a very big guy. I'm not a very big guy. And do you think wrestling's a good sport for to kind of neutralize size disadvantage and things like that? And for
Oh
our
yeah.
listeners, you're like, what are you walking around at, and what's your height
Mhm.
and whatnot? Just for our listeners who
Yeah.
don't know.
Now I'm 5'7", 185.
Okay.
So yeah, growing up, I was obviously small. Like I said, I finished at 140 as a senior. I was bigger than that. I walked around at probably like 152, and I would
Mm-hmm.
cut down to make 140. So I was a little bigger than what I was
You would
actually
cut
wrestling at.
12 pounds. Is that normal though? That sounds like a lot to me to
Yeah,
just
I
cut
mean,
10 to 12 pounds off of like one. Because I walk around at like 155, right? And for me to
yeah,
like cut down to like 145, that does not sound easy to do. I mean, maybe easier in high school, but like, I don't know, man. That's like,
it wasn't easy. It was awful actually. So, and it
okay.
was mostly all water weight. So you would basically just torture yourself to, dehydrate yourself last minute in order to get there. So I would,
Jesus.
and I would diet too, but I wouldn't say I had the best methods at that time. This is talking mostly in the 90s and the early
Hmm.
2000s. So dieting it wasn't as, I guess, evolved as it is now, but
Right.
it was a lot of crash dieting, like kind of
Yeah.
starving yourself last minute, and I could shed 5 pounds in an hour if I needed to. So I just put a trash bag on or some suit, and I could run on a treadmill and lose 5 pounds in 1 hour. So
I was about to ask, how the hell do you lose 5 pounds in an hour? So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
the technique. You put a trash bag on and then just run on a treadmill and you sweat it. You
yeah,
sweat out 5 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah. I
God, man,
could do
that's
that.
crazy.
Yeah.
So that was like normal, like for like you and your wrestling buddies in high school. This was like just a normal thing. Oh, I got to cut weight for the next competition. So
It
here
was.
goes.
Yeah, it was normal. Not everyone. Like there were varying degrees of who would cut weight, right? So
Yeah.
you'd have your handful of guys that had to make a little bit bigger cut than others. Your heavier weights, usually your guys at like 215, 275, they were eating spaghetti dinners and stuff the night before. Like they did whatever they wanted. I was always
Okay.
super jealous of those guys, but
Okay.
yeah, so you'd have guys that weren't digging in that hard all the time to make weight, but others were, it's probably like a 50-50.
So like, why were those big guys not digging in hard to make weight? Like you could have just wrestled at 152 or whatever, right? So why like the stress about like I got to cut weight like Loudon did in that movie? I remember that. I'm like, why the stress? Just wrestle at the weight you're at. Like what?
I know I know, and it's hard to explain, and it's silly. And if I could do it again, I wouldn't do it that way. I think
Wow.
I got pulled into. It'd be one thing to lose a couple pounds or whatever here and there, but not. I wouldn't take the drastic cut. Like you get kind of put in the spot where, too, like you got to remember you have 14 spaces to fill at the high school level, and at college you get 10, and you got everybody on your team, and you're trying to set up your team so that you have the best chance to win these tournaments, right? Because when you win individually as a wrestler, you're accruing points for your team, and you
Okay.
want to have, so like you might have a buddy who is really good that's at 152 above you, and you don't want to bump him out. And it's like, hey, you can do what's best for the team to be at 140, and also there might be somebody at 152 who's at the best in the state or best in New England that maybe you're best suited to win at the weight lower. Or your height and your build and everything might be better suited for the one a little lower. You just kind of get caught up in this odd pressure to get to a certain weight. And even frankly, at the time, coaches could be a factor too. Coaches might want you at a certain weight.
Right.
And when they want you at a certain weight, sometimes you can get sucked into that, like, hey, like we need you here. And you get kind of into that fold as well. So that was a part.
No kidding,
for some
man. I
people.
can't even, it never would have occurred to me that it's like, oh, there's enough people on our team at this weight class, so we need you to be in a different weight class. I mean, I would always think it would just be because it's advantageous for you. It would never occur to me that the entire team is involved. But wow, a lot of thought goes into that. There's a lot of factors there, huh?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, because you're trying to be, as much as it's like on the surface, it looks like an individual sport.
Yeah.
There's a huge team component. And, like if you look at, like right now, like you think of the best team. I know you don't follow wrestling, but Penn State is like super dominant right at the Division I level, and they're known as being the best team. They win they have the most points that they accrue. So they're not talking about an individual wrestler in Penn State. Their team in general is just cover to cover outstanding.
Yeah.
So it's still very much a team sport
Okay.
in that way.
Yeah.
Winning those tournaments and stuff as a team is super, super important to people. So
Right. So question. So like college. So where'd you go to college, and was like wrestling a factor in choosing a college and all that?
Oh yeah. So
Really?
it was, yeah, big time. I mean, I was, I was not a good student or anything growing up. So like I pretty much, I did like the bare minimum. I later turned it around a little in college, but growing up, I did not get good classes. I was in general ed. All I did was kind of focus on the wrestling mostly. So
Mhm.
I was that was kind of like it was like the one thing that I was good at, right? So I really embraced that and
Yeah.
focused on that like 2/3 of the year. So getting into college, I was recruited. I ended up being one of the top wrestlers in New England by my junior and senior year.
Right.
So I got recruited, but only by Division III schools. At that time, it's very hard in the New England area to be looked at by the big Division I schools. But I was recruited and got some grant money to go to Norwich University.
And
in
where's
Vermont.
that? What did you say? Norwich?
Yeah, Norwich University. It's a military school in Vermont. So
All right. Now,
yeah.
how far is that? See, I don't even know. Is that like an hour
Yeah.
from New Hampshire? Is that like 5 hours? I have no idea.
The Vermont border it's only like probably an hour and a half, I think, from here where I am.
Oh,
but it's
okay.
but where I was that's in Northfield, Vermont. So that was at the time for me, it was about a 2.5 hour ride, and probably hour and a half to 2 hours from where I am now. So It's
Okay.
central Vermont. Burlington's the biggest city in Vermont. It was about 45 minutes south of there.
So, question though, I mean, was that the best offer you got? And had you looked elsewhere? Had you thought about, the big schools like Penn State, or like, were you thinking all over the nation, or were you pretty much like, I'm going to stay in the New England area?
I was open-minded to going anywhere, but I wasn't, I did not think about applying to any of those big schools because there was I don't think I had the academics to do it. And
Okay.
I still wasn't, you'd have to be, like I said, being in Maine, even as like a high level Maine wrestler, I still wasn't really marketable at one of those type of schools. There were some people that did get it and could walk on, and that would have been really ideal. I think if I were to look at it from that perspective, is if I had better grades, I probably could have walked on and got made the team on a big school if I wanted to
Okay.
go that route. But
Okay.
so Norwich, they gave me some like grant money and stuff to go there. It was a good school, and I was really one of the few that I could get into. I was because my grades are so bad, I wasn't able to get in many schools. So the coach kind of I got a conditional acceptance. I did some local math classes at a community college to get in,
I
and
know a little bit about that.
yeah.
Math classes at a community college. Yeah.
Oh, you
Okay.
did
Well,
that too?
that's
All right. Yeah.
no. I mean, just that's what I do. I teach those. So
Oh, okay. All right. I
yeah,
was
yeah.
gonna say you're good at that stuff. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I'm good
Yeah.
enough. I can fake it pretty well. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so wrestling. But I mean, as much as you were, you said your academics weren't great, but I mean, it was wrestling. It was your skills at wrestling that pretty much got you a pretty good place at a decent school, right?
Oh, 100%. And then it got me in there. It got me a little bit of, some, like I said, some grant money, help with the tuition. The tuition was expensive because it's a private school.
Okay.
And I was able to, and then, you know what, truthfully, I kind of made a pledge to myself at that time that I was going to take what I had learned from wrestling and apply that to kind of like, with the work ethic, because wrestling is a grind, man. Like it's a brutal sport, super hard. And I started to take those principles and apply it to what, my schoolwork. And, I was going to like
Hmm.
actually like train for school, meaning I was going to do my homework and study and like actually prepare myself.
Okay.
And that worked out pretty well. And it was a good place to do it because there was nothing going on up there. We're in the middle of the mountains. There wasn't much for partying.
Okay.
Not that to say that we didn't find a way to party anyway, but it was still less than what it would be at other schools. And
Right.
then,
I'm sure you always 20-year-olds always find a way to party,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
No matter where they are. So
yeah,
how was your
yeah.
wrestling career in college? Did you wrestle all 4 years?
I did, and then I kind of mentioned it quickly. I've had an issue with my right knee, which I
Right.
rebounded from and had surgery. I had surgery in my right one in high school, and that derailed me from my sophomore year. Well, I came out and I wrestled well my freshman year in college, and I think I still played. I think I ended up fifth in New England as a freshman, and
Sorry, when you say New England, which states does that encompass as far as like, the wrestling
yeah.
competition goes?
So we're talking Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Got it. So that's
yeah,
all those states. So that means
yeah,
every D3 college in those states. Add them
yeah.
all up, and that's in your what, conference or whatever,
Yeah,
right?
that was our conference. So it'd be the
Okay.
New England Conference. That's what we wrestled in. So you'd have like, Springfield College, New England College, not New England College, sorry, Western New England College, um, Johnson and Wales, even MIT was in there.
Okay.
Those kind of schools.
Okay.
So
So what were the big competitors for your school? Like, you were at God, Norwich, right? So
yeah,
what
Norwich, yeah.
so like what other school was like your biggest rival? Is it like that? Is it like this other school is our biggest rival, or is it like this individual is my biggest rival at this other school?
In college, we didn't. There was definitely like a lot of It was very, very competitive, and everyone was, digging in to win. We didn't have a necessarily rival as much as I did in high school. Like, no,
Okay.
we had like a Marshwood Noble, which is the town north of us in high school. That was a pretty big rival at the time. When we were in college, like we were very competitive and we were always trying to keep up with Springfield College, which is out in Springfield, Mass. They were kind of the standard of New England at that time. And probably they maybe still are. They were always a very good wrestling school, and we were always trying to match them. Like they would oftentimes win that New England tournament, and we were very competitive with them. Beat them a couple times in dual meet, but I don't think we ever beat them in the big New England tournament,
Okay.
unfortunately. So
Okay. Got it. Got it. And so do you remember any of your I don't know, do you remember any what's like is there like a most memorable match for you or one of the most memorable matches that you could take us through?
um, I could tell you the most memorable tournament offhand. Let's see, the most memorable match. I don't. When I was a senior, I wrestled. I wrestled in the Ithaca Invitational, which is out in Ithaca, New York. And that was a big tournament at the time. Like when I was in college, the Ithaca Invitational was considered to be like if you won that tournament, it was like you were considered all American level wrestler. Like you were in that category. So
Okay.
that was which would mean you were like top 8 in the country
Okay.
if you won that. That's what all American level was. That I that tournament I had like 40 to 50 people in my weight class, and I won that tournament. So I would say like offhand,
Wow.
I won, and I won very convincingly, and I beat to finish that tournament. I pinned the guy in the second period, and I got like dominated it, and I had just dominated really the whole tournament. And
Wow. And you said 40 to 50 guys, so you're like in
yeah,
brackets and then you eventually kind of get down to the final match. So
right.
how many matches up until like how many total matches were there out of in that tournament for you?
I think I had 4 matches. So, but you
Okay.
get, when it starts out, they meet up and they place you based on like your kind of where you're ranked and what your background is, right? So if you're a
Yeah.
kid that like walked on at a school and you wrestled for 3 years in high school, you're probably not going to get the best seed in there, right? And there's only a
Okay.
few of those, but so those guys will battle it out in the beginning, and then you get put in. I think I had been seeded pretty high in the tournament,
Okay.
and so it kind of works its way out. There might be single elimination at the very beginning. Then it
Okay.
pairs down to like a 16-man bracket. Then it goes down to 8. Then it goes down to 4. Then it
Right.
goes down, to the
Right.
finals. So I think I wrestled 4 matches, but that tournament I was just on my game. And like that tournament would bring, like, you'd have wrestlers. They weren't the starters, but you'd have people from like Cornell show up to that, or sometimes some Brown University would sometimes send wrestlers to that. So you'd have like some good, a lot of schools, a lot of really good wrestlers. So that was a big achievement of mine. And the kid that I beat, unfortunately, the season didn't end the way I wanted it. But the kid I beat ended up winning the New England tournament. I was not able to get that. I hurt myself in my last tournament of the year, my senior year. So
Oh, really? In the last so okay, hold on, hold on. So this
yeah,
Ithaca tournament you were talking about, you like this so this was kind of like your most definitive winning tournament, right? Like 40, 50 guys in the whole
yeah,
area and you won and I got to back up even more, man. Like I don't like there's no belts in wrestling, so
yeah.
how are people ranked and whatnot? It's just based on your history, I guess, and what
Yeah, it
people
is.
know.
Yeah, like if at that time, like I'm a senior, right? So what had I done in previous years? What was my record? Like who had I beaten? So the coaches would get together and they'd kind of advocate, like, hey, I think such and such wrestler should be at this seed. And I was never part of those meetings, but I think there was someone running it, and they would be like,
Okay.
okay,
Okay.
based in light of the evidence, this is how it should go, kind of thing. And
Okay. All right.
so yeah, like it would, your record, what you've won, who you've beaten,
Okay. All right.
that kind of thing. And it, if you made it like I had made it to the national tournament before, so that's a factor
Yeah.
going in. So
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome, man. Do you miss wearing a singlet?
I didn't mind wearing it. Like at the time, I was let's say my physique looked a little better than it does these days, so I didn't mind wearing it, but it was yeah. I mean, it was always like one of those things where guys would joke with you, especially people who weren't wrestlers. They'd love
Oh
to
yeah.
throw digs at you for that, but it never really bothered me, to be honest with you. So
Do you still have your singlet?
I do have one. Yeah, one. I have one on my high school one somewhere. Yeah,
Okay. When's the
yeah.
last time you put it on?
Oh, it's been a long time. Probably 15 years, 20 years ago.
You don't put it on for fun ever?
No, not anytime recently.
Yeah, we have a friend out here, a buddy of ours who used to wrestle, and so we give him, yeah, we tease him about the singlet
Oh, do you?
quite a bit.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I
Yeah.
had to drop a singlet question in there,
Sure.
just cause.
Yeah.
So hey, let's talk jujitsu, man. So you started
Yeah.
in '07, you said, and I can only assume you're a black belt.
No, no, I'm not a black belt only because I've been kind of I'm a purple belt to
Okay,
clarify, but
okay,
I've been kind of a journeyman with my jujitsu training. I've had a lot of interruptions and stuff. I still love it and have, full aspirations of continuing with it as long as I can.
mm-hmm.
But I did start, yeah, in '07. I was at court, I remember, because I had been hired at a cop at that point, and there was a friend of mine who actually wrestled for Springfield that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
He wrestled at the same time. He was a New Hampshire State Trooper, and we were at court together, and he told me, he's like, hey, there's a black belt, in the area, and like, I've been training, like you should come down. Like he's like, it's good stuff. Like, and this time in '07, like jiu-jitsu was not what it is now, right? Like
no,
it
it's
was
crazy
not.
now.
Yeah,
It's
like
exploded.
right, right. And now, and we're also talking New Hampshire, right? So I'm sure in California at that time it was, relatively popular, not anything like it is now, but relatively popular maybe. But here he was the only black belt in the entire state, which that tells you the change.
Wow,
That tells you
wow,
the
yeah,
changing of the times, right? So
absolutely.
I went down to this basement of a karate studio to train with these guys, and it was a real small area, and there was a handful of guys. And this guy, my teacher was from Brazil, and he was like a tall, super strong dude who barely spoke English, but we started training, and at the time, to be honest with you, I didn't like I was thinking that day when I went, like I'm gonna mow these guys down, right? Like I'm like I have
Because of wrestling, right?
Oh yeah, and like truth be told, I'm like, yeah, maybe they show some submissions or whatever. I'm like, but these guys got no idea. Wrestling is the standard. Like I really didn't have a ton of respect for it at the time. So I'm thinking like, I'm gonna smash these dudes when we start
Okay,
wrestling.
hold on. I can see what this is. I can see what this is building up to, man. And this is okay. So hold on. So I didn't
Yeah,
know like you had heard about jujitsu before your friend even mentioned it to you that day in court, right? And I know your
yeah,
brothers do jujitsu, or I don't know how much Tom does, but I know Brian is very into it.
yeah.
But had either one of them started yet at this time, or no?
No, no.
Oh, okay,
Brian didn't start till years later, and Tom actually is not a jujitsu guy. He
okay,
wrestled, like I
okay.
said, for a long time, but not the jujitsu. Brian, big time. But I had so yeah. But at the time I knew of it. I only really knew of it like from watching like the UFC, like right, like Randy Couture, and this is back in those
Yeah.
days.
Oh,
Chuck Liddell and those guys.
oh
Like yeah.
yeah.
So
The
yeah,
heydays.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like that's where, and of course like the Hoist Gracie movement when
Yeah.
in the
But
90s.
hold
So
on, you'd seen all that, but you still it's interesting to me that most people have watched all that and had been convinced that I want to learn jujitsu.
yeah.
But it sounds like you had seen all that and you were still like, no, I'm gonna
Well,
whoop these guys' asses.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I thought at the time like, yeah, they got some good stuff, but like I was like,
Yeah.
but I think I just was I mean, I was just being I was only like 24 years old at the time, and I had wrestled like 400 matches or something, right? And
Yeah.
I just knew like there's no way these guys are going to be able to keep up with me in my mind. Like
Yeah.
I just that was just me being a little on the ignorant side. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right. So okay. So keep going. Sorry. So then
Yeah,
your
yeah,
idea was I'm going to destroy these guys. And do you
yeah,
remember like your first couple of rolls and all that and how it went down?
yeah. I do. So I ended up rolling, and I did roll with a couple white belts who like if I did, the reality is if I did go on our feet, and we always sometimes started down at the time, but more commonly than not. But when I was going on my feet, I was taking them down without even trying. Like that did
Yeah.
happen. But when I went with guys who were like a blue belt or an experienced white belt, I was getting caught. Like I remember the first day I got caught in a triangle, big time. I got choked like immediately by a blue belt who, was like not built, and he was just like a tall kind of gangly guy, right? And here he was choking me, and that hit the ego pretty hard because I couldn't believe that this guy could get me,
Yeah.
and there was a couple others too. There was a guy who was in his 40s who was a blue belt, and is another guy who I thought, and of course I was moving way too fast, using too much power, because wrestling is a lot of speed and power. You know what I mean? Like that's that you got to give jiu-jitsu a ton of credit when it comes to that, because you can slow down, and it's so much more of a technique over power kind of thing. And that's not to say, as you know, that power isn't a factor. Obviously it is, but it's not as big of a factor as it is in wrestling. I think we rely a lot on speed, athleticism, and power in wrestling, more so there. So, and I was trying to use that stuff, rolling with people, and with the guys who knew what they were doing, they were catching me in things because I was leaving myself open,
Yeah, yeah. So okay. So you were ready to mow these guys down. Now, at that point, when you were thinking that, when you're like, I'm going to destroy these guys, I'm going to mow them down, were you thinking to yourself, okay, I'll walk in, maybe I'll learn a couple things, and then I'll get back to my life? Like, were you even considering, like, sticking with it for a while to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I was considering sticking with it because I was looking
Okay.
for something new. I was a little burnt out on wrestling. I mean, obviously, like the years of it, the weight cutting, like it had kind of taken its toll, right? So I needed something different, and it was something different, but it was still something that I was able to use. Like it was kind of a hybrid between wrestling and a new skill. So I was able to use the wrestling moves that I enjoyed using, and I was adding all kinds of tools to it, and I was open. So I pretty much was hooked right out of the gate. I loved it, and I kept coming back.
Right, right. So right out of the gate, that's awesome. And I
Yeah.
guess I kind of jumped out of order on here, but you were already in law enforcement before this. Like, what year did you get into law enforcement?
Yeah, so I started in March of '06.
Oh,
So
so just before it. So a little bit before
yeah,
that.
yeah, so it didn't take long. It was only really a year maybe before I was already training jiu-jitsu.
Okay, so when you started in '07, or I guess when you were at your peak of, training frequency, how often were you training?
3 times a week, sometimes four.
No kidding. That's pretty
Yeah,
frequently, and that's with this
yeah,
black belt guy you were talking about, right? The only
it
one in the
was.
whole state.
Yeah, yeah. And
Okay.
yeah, at the time he was the first black belt in New Hampshire, and that was a big marketing technique.
Oh,
That
hell
was
yeah.
the only one, which is it's
Yeah.
just wild because the Nashua Police Department, a police department nearby here, has like 6 of them right now in New Hampshire, in the police
Okay.
department alone. So that goes to show how much the sport has exploded.
Right, right. And were you in a gi or no gi?
Yeah, well, he's in a gi. We did do
Okay.
a little bit of no gi as well. So, but yeah, and I was in a gi, and even though it was such a departure from wrestling, I liked it. I thought it was fun. I used it a lot for chokes and stuff, and I kind of embraced it, even though I was better without it.
Wait, what do you mean better without it? You said better without jujitsu?
No, 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 better without the gi on. Sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
better
Right.
better in no gi. I mean, technically, if I were to compete, which I ultimately did, I know you're gonna ask, you wanted to
Oh
talk about
yeah.
that, but I, if I was technically better if I took the gi off, because it became much more of a wrestling match, right? So it played to my
Right.
strength.
Right. Gotcha. So yeah, so I wanted to ask your wrestling instincts. I'm sure there's ways in which it help you, obviously as far as takedowns, but yeah, like can you expand a little bit on how your wrestling instincts helped you and hurt you?
I mean, I think for me overall, it was 90 something percent a help, because it's not just the takedowns, right? It's like like you learn how to uh, control people on the ground, how to use your hips, how people, you develop a sense of balance and control and technique on the ground from wrestling. I mean, because you've got to use leverage and positioning in order to turn somebody to their back and hold them there and pin their shoulders down. The concepts are relatively similar as when you're trying to, in jiu-jitsu, when you're trying to get heavy on someone and plant them to the ground so they can't move. So it's just fine tuning your techniques. Using the wrestling really was nothing. It was nothing but a benefit, really. The only way it wouldn't be is if you're closed-minded and you're like not really willing to evolve. Like you're just like, no way, I'm not going to my back because it makes me feel like I'm going to get pinned. Like you have to You have to be humble. You have to be willing to like broaden your horizons a little bit. And if you're willing to do that, then the wrestling is nothing but a benefit.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So as long as you're open-minded, then the
Right.
wrestling skills are only going to help you. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
can we get a lot of wrestling guys or, I mean, I've only been training for like a year and a half now, and obviously I'm still a white belt. I still feel like I don't know much of anything. But yeah, when we get guys in there, even the guys that are like closer to my age who have a wrestling background, it's I'll roll with a dude and he will destroy me who might be brand new, and then I'll find out later, oh, he was a wrestler, and I'm like, okay, well that makes me feel at least a little bit better about getting beaten by this dude who just started, even though I've got allegedly all this experience. So, but yeah, I'm
Yeah.
very much jealous of the wrestling guys and their takedowns because takedown. I don't feel. I don't know how long it's going to take for me to feel more comfortable with takedowns. I'd say that's the weakest by far part of my game right now, and obviously in jiu-jitsu, it's only a small part of jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? Most of it is on the ground. We often start on the ground, and obviously at my age, I feel like if I too many takedowns, I'm going to break something, and then I'm out for months. Again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, the wrestling guys, I'm definitely jealous of their skills and abilities coming into the mat. And so, yeah, how would you say, like, do you train with a lot of, or do you still train these days? I mean, I guess we're gonna get there, but like, you're training more like in the law enforcement side of jujitsu, right?
Yeah. So I train my training right now is sporadic. We had So we're talking a number of years now, right? So almost, God, I started training almost 18, 19 years ago now. So
Right.
right now, so yeah, I get into we have a police athletic league in Manchester where I
Okay.
work, and that has like these giant wrestling mats. It's got a boxing ring. It's got all this awesome, it's a big like fighter gym, really. It's kind of,
Yeah.
and any of us can use it. So some of the guys that I work with, we go down there, like I'm getting in there a couple times a month and doing some grappling and like we work some technique and still rolling. Like I'm not getting formal instruction in the sense that I'm not moving up in ranks. So that's why I've been
Yeah.
stagnant for a number of years in terms of that, which I'm okay with, but I'll eventually get there. Right now, the family and kids is just killing me with schedule.
I get it.
I start working at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then after school I have activities, and I haven't been in. And I work more than 40 hours a week too, so it's hard to it's just it's almost impossible for me to go to formal classes, and with travel time and everything, you're talking probably close to 3 hours a time, and I just can't do it right now. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'll get
But
there eventually.
yeah, and so what is your take us a little bit, at least a little bit through your career in law enforcement because it started in '06 you said, and what was
Yep.
your like were you just like patrol then, and then did you move on to detective? What are you now? And can you
Yep.
take us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so in '06 I started in a small town which is just south of Manchester. So Manchester, like I said, is the largest city in New Hampshire. It's That's where I currently work,
Okay.
and it was in Litchfield. So that's a town of like 10,000 people, and I worked there for 4 years. I was a patrol officer that whole time, and it was a good like good place to work. Like I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. It was a great place to learn, and much more of like a nice residential community. A lot of traffic stops and things like that. A couple domestic violence calls, like some property crimes, things like that. I didn't deal with a ton of serious stuff at that stage of my career necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
except for maybe a little bit few and far between, serious car accidents, things like that. So I wanted to move on and some more opportunities and stuff. And Manchester was where I lived at the time, and it's like 115,000 people, and it had a lot of specialty divisions and stuff, and then and a lot of crime, right?
Wait,
So
hold on. Did you say Manchester is the biggest city in New Hampshire and
yeah,
it has a population of 115,000?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I knew New
that's true.
Hampshire was small. I had no idea the
Yeah,
biggest city was that small. That is
yeah.
freaking small. Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Wow.
mean, and Maine is even, it's geographically a big state, and the largest city is, I think, like 70,000, Portland. So yeah, it's
Okay.
big. It's a lot different out here.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely. Yes.
when I, even though it only has 115,000, it has kind of big city problems, right?
Okay.
So and we're doing a little bit better now, but it's plenty of work to do, we'll say. So I came
Okay.
over there in May of 2010. I
Okay.
transferred to Manchester and got hired there. I worked patrol there for 4 years, and then I became a detective, like investigating adult crimes at that point. And so that was everything from like starting with the most serious, like homicides, down to like serious assaults, robberies, armed robberies, like your bank robberies, convenience store robbery type stuff, burglary investigations, which I did a lot of, and then, property crimes, fraud, things along those lines. So we
Hmm.
kind of ran the gamut of those crimes.
So was it like, I mean, I gotta ask, is it like Law and Order? Like if I watch an episode of Law and Order, is that pretty much your life at that time as a detective,
No,
or is there a better show that I can compare it to?
um, I would say no to answer that question, but I don't know if there is a show that would really represent what it is. Probably not.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't think there's a problem. And if there is, I haven't seen it. We'll say that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
but no, I mean, it was great. Like that was kind of what I aspired to do. Like I wanted, I had uh, I had always had like a super strong interest in crime. So
Okay.
you know, I always did, and when I got to Manchester, I knew I was going to be able to get my hands in it, and
Hmm.
ultimately, I was able to work on a number of homicides and stuff, and did a lot of interviews. Like I was in there for almost 7 years, so
Were
I
there
did.
any that were at least like, like a homicide where it was like you had to do some serious investigating, some serious detective work, like forensics and all that? It's like who done it?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, the forensics. I mean, definitely played a role in a few of our cases. I would say
Okay.
the biggest, that obviously I think that gets amplified in Hollywood and TV shows and stuff, right? That's not to say that they aren't a factor, because they are, but most of the time that you're solving something, I would say, is through your interviews. Obviously, the big thing now is like surveillance, right? You got to pour through surveillance. You're
Okay.
seizing cell phones. That's a big part, right? Seizing cell
Yeah.
phones and being able to extract data from them, text messages and
Okay.
social media. And that's kind of where your information is. And then, of
Okay.
course, a lot of, tracing firearms. And I mean, absolutely, like I did, some of my best forensic stuff, just for a quick example, would be like I had some burglary cases where you would seize, like I had a burglar who left cigarette butt or two at a couple of cases, and I was able to collect that and send it to the lab and identify them based on their saliva DNA that they left on the
DNA.
cigarette.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Or they break a window in a burglary and they cut themselves on the way in and they bleed in the house, right? They
Yeah.
leave blood
Right.
behind. So if they're a felon, which most of the times they are, all you need to do is collect that sample of blood and you send it to the state. And
Okay.
then months later, when they get around to it and they get back to you, they'll come back and say, "Hey, this is so and so, by the way." So
Wow.
and then you can do a warrant for them that way.
Now, was
So
there ever one where like, you weren't sure who it was, but you had interviewed them and then the DNA came back and you were like, holy shit, it was that guy?
um, I don't think there was one where I had interviewed them and didn't couldn't
And
otherwise
didn't.
solve it, and then
Okay.
later found
Okay.
out. I definitely had the one with the cigarette butt. I definitely knew who the guy was. Absolutely knew he was a burglar and just
Okay.
a piece of trash. And
Okay.
then and also with the one I'm thinking of offhand, where a guy cut himself coming in through a window to burglarize a house. I knew who he was too. He was a serial burglar. So
Okay.
there was definitely, I hadn't interviewed him for that particular case. Those guys, I don't think would have volunteered. They probably wouldn't have interviewed unless they probably would have declined an interview, I guess. So
Okay.
most
Well,
of the time, those guys wouldn't submit to an interview.
what about a homicide? Was there ever a time when you were interviewing somebody and they just cracked under the pressure and they're like, I did it. It was me.
You know what? One time, yeah. But I've actually done, because you don't always get. It depends on the case, right? You don't
Yeah.
always get an opportunity to interview a homicide suspect, because
Okay.
they may not do the interview, or if you arrest them and then they might lawyer up. So, but in this
Right.
particular case, was a good one. A guy point blank in a city street he had an issue with a particular guy, And as soon as he got out of jail, he he met with them right in a a busy part of the city and pulled out a gun and just blew him away right there. And it was like
Wow.
a big manhunt for this dude for like 2 3 days, and we had reason to believe, or well, we weren't entirely sure if he was still in the city, and he, as it turned out, he was. And we were
Okay.
chasing leads for like a 2 3. It was like a mad dash around the city trying to find this guy, and eventually some surveillance, got some guys on surveillance. Saw him and chased him and took him down at gunpoint. Didn't lead to a shooting or anything,
Okay.
and we took him into custody. And I got to my partner and I got to do that interview, which was pretty cool. And he confessed to it. So
Okay. Okay. But I mean, wow, that's awesome. But you knew for sure. There was no question. I mean, it was just a matter of finding him and bringing him in. And obviously, you want to get that confession.
yeah,
But you knew. I mean, you knew exactly who he was, and there was no question that he had done it, right?
yeah. I mean, I think there was good evidence. It was
Oh,
definitely
okay.
very. It ended up being really really good that we got the confession. I mean,
Okay.
it held up. He waived his Miranda rights, which I remember sweating that out at the time that that was going on, and
Yeah.
he did waive his rights, and he agreed to talk, and we basically, and we didn't do anything special that day. I remember we sat there and he was super emotional, and it was like a glorified counseling session where he just kind of let it off his chest and
Okay.
told us what he did, and we just sat there and kind of like were patient with him and let him talk, and
Okay.
he came out with it. And
Okay.
he kind of made it, like most of them do. They minimize it or try to justify it a little bit in some way to make it out like they weren't as bad of people as they are.
Right.
But
Right.
he came out with it, and it stood up, and I think he got life without parole. So
Okay.
yeah, so that was pretty cool experience.
Um, I've been dying to get to this part of the interview where we discuss, and you already touched on it earlier, and which is basically how jujitsu applies in law enforcement, and which is really a question of how does jujitsu apply in real life? Is it really real life
Right.
applicable? And because everybody I train with, and probably everybody who trains jujitsu, there's at least an element of I need this, I want this for self defense, and there's at least an element of not we're on the mat, we're wearing gis, we're wearing these pajamas on this cushy floor. Like, what would really how would I be if this were really pressure tested? Like, does it really work? Does it really hold up? And I mean, you hear that it does. You hear that it's the best, and you've already pretty much said that if you had to pick one, this would be it. So, yeah, like just in general, the topic of jujitsu and for self-defense and jujitsu in law enforcement. Yeah, do you want to discuss that a little bit, and then maybe tell us about some times on the job where the wrestling, jujitsu, grappling has come into play?
Yeah, sure. And I would say it is really a kind of a combination of the two. I never really do one necessarily over the other unless because they kind of merge together, right? It's like that's why I call
Yeah,
it like
well,
grappling.
especially for
So
you, you can't really
yeah,
separate them, right?
no, they just naturally kind of come together. So yeah. So I philosophically, but I'm a huge advocate. I mean, I even am known for it around at the police department. Like I said, I have taught what we call defensive tactics for law enforcement at our police department, and it's very jujitsu based and a little bit of wrestling as well. But the jujitsu would be the kind of the core of what it is, and that's tough because it's you only get in a few hours to show sometimes a handful of people who are not they don't train on their own, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of this is something new, and as you know, like you're training now, like it takes more than a few hours to learn jujitsu, right? So you're kind of introducing them to it and show them a few things, and you hope that they kind of take it and run with it. And
Mm-hmm.
but it's definitely there's no question in my mind that it's tremendous for self defense. I've seen it with because I have a handful of officers that I work with who do train, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen it massively in myself, but even not including myself, like there's some select officers that I know of who have trained and have put the time in, and kind of the way they carry themselves on the street, the way they handle themselves in use of force scenarios is just at a higher level than most officers do. And that is, it's not only just the physical skill set, right? It's a mindset. You know what I mean? Like it's a psychological advantage that you have over the common person when you've trained. And it just, even just grappling alone, especially if you include some takedowns, like there's something to be said for, there's a lot to be said for just having lived in those spots for a while. Like you need to put the time in and kind of live in there for a bit and go on, on the mat and get pressured, get choked, get submitted over and over and over again. And you do your best to kind of crawl slowly out and start working your technique. And when you do that, you develop your skill set, obviously. And as you've talked about before, because I've heard it, is like you get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And that applies to policing. I can tell you specifically that there's been countless times where what I would consider to be basic, resisting arrest scenarios where someone's on the ground refusing to give their hands, and you got to kind of get on them and try to place them under arrest and get their hands behind the back, secure them in handcuffs, which to someone who has trained and has a lengthy grappling background, like those scenarios are generally pretty easy and not that difficult, case dependent. Like if the guy's 300 pounds, like that
I was going to ask, yeah, does like, if he's a huge guy, it's got to be a little bit harder, but even in that case, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that obviously, like, you can never overcome the size factor. Like size is a factor. Like if the guy's huge, like it's going to be an issue, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't win. And I'll get to a story, in a minute here of someone who I took down in a live scenario who was way bigger than me, and he didn't stand a chance, frankly.
Yeah,
so
I want to hear about it.
So it's just it changes. And if you ask me, and if I said this on a law enforcement podcast or something, I would probably get ripped, and the guys would get upset. But that's because they're just being sensitive, really. But it's almost essential, in my opinion, to have that kind of background to get to where you should be, where you need to be. If you, like, when you're talking, like, you're out in the street with someone roadside doing an interview, and and that person's like a suspect in something, and you're by yourself, particularly, or even like you're interviewing someone anywhere, you're inside a domestic, like when you have that background, you bring so much more to the table. You're much more calm. When you're digging for someone's hands to place them in handcuffs, you're not tensed up and like completely loaded up with adrenaline. It becomes normal. You know what I mean? Like when you're on the ground with somebody and you're getting heavy on them and you're digging in and grabbing their hands and putting them behind your back, which I can do very easily on almost everybody. It changes things. Like, you'll see guys get in there and they just start throwing punches, and they don't, they react in that like aggressive.
And you're talking about officers, right? Like getting in there throwing punches. So you're saying, if you have all this background, one thing you're saying is, it sounds like almost one of the biggest things is just the mental side of it, just being able to be calm in those really challenging situations that cops get into a lot, for one, and two, being able to physically handle suspects in ways that aren't going to hurt them for the most part and hurt you. So you're a big proponent of like law enforcement officers needing to be trained in these types of skills. It sounds like, yeah.
Oh yeah, big time. I think it's massively important. I think the logistics sometimes of having that happen in terms of like funding and getting people to train. Are they training on duty? Are they, that's where you run into the problems, right? And then you run into some officers are more fit than others. Some officers are more willing to do it, and there's an ego component, right? Like, there's some officers, not just officers, people in society too, but it can be particularly a problem with police, where they don't want to put themselves in that vulnerable spot where someone could be handing that, giving it to them and getting their ass handed to them. It's a hit to the ego, right? So it's hard to do, especially if you're, a cop who's got, the tight sleeves around your biceps and you lift weights and you look the part, right? Like they don't want to go into a gym and get choked by some regular Joe who
Oh, so that
delivers pizza for a living. You know what I
right. That's
mean?
what I was
So
going to ask. When you said that, you meant literally cops who are already, yeah, it's got to be difficult for somebody who's been on the force for a long time, who even is relatively physically fit, to be told, look, you, even though you've been here that long, you've got all this experience. Yeah, we want you to have these skills now. So I'm sure, do you run into that a lot then? A lot of that ego, kind of preventing people from going to get the skills they need?
yeah, I mean, no one would ever admit that that's the reason, but that's my perception of it, right? That's definitely a factor. Is I think there's a lot of guys because there's a lot of guys who are that I work with who are very fitness oriented. They're strong. They go out and do, some of them get involved in races and triathlete type competitions and stuff like that. So they're not opposed to the work or putting in the time to their fitness goals, but they may not feel comfortable because they don't want to get put in that spot where someone isn't going to get the better of them in a fighting environment, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to accept, and especially if you have a group of cops who are going and it's like, hey, I'm going to be jumping into this room with 10 guys who have already trained, like they're gonna whip my ass and then they're gonna tell everybody around here that I'm soft. You know what I mean? Like that's what
Right.
that's kind of the way I see it.
Sure.
So it's
Sure.
there's definitely an element of that, but if you're willing to check your ego a little bit, be humble, get in there, it would be an absolute game changer for you as a cop if you did it. And
Mm-hmm.
it would because it's just the confidence that I've had throughout my career when I'm off at someone and if I'm going to get into a struggle with somebody is next level. Like I just have it in my head that short of it being a one percenter, I'm going to be able to take you down. There's almost no way that they're going to be able to stop it. And then when we get to the ground, I'm better trained than you, and you're going to lose. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the way I see it, and that's the way, frankly, that's the way it's been. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's because I've put the time in. Right? You got to be willing to put it in that way, and there's other areas where I haven't. Like I could be better with firearms. I could tell you that. So I put it in the grappling and fighting space, but I'm guilty of it in other areas too. So I get it.
Yeah, tell us if you could tell us about yes, like a specific incident or two where the grappling skills. It sounds like you've got countless, but can you pick
Um,
out two where it's like, you could like, was there a jiu-jitsu specific move, a kimura, or I don't know, anything like that?
I have so on a smaller scale, like with basic resisting arrest scenarios. Like sometimes you'll get in a spot where like you go to put someone in cuffs and they'll start to like kind of pull away and you're like, you may not be full on fighting you, right? But they're like, whoa, hold on, this isn't happening kind of thing, right? So I have put in like basic Kimuras there for, and like kind of put the pressure on and be like, hey, put your other hand behind your back kind of thing. Like, and use that to apply pressure to the shoulder and like put them in that uncomfortable spot. I've done that
Are
a
you
couple
guys
of
both
times.
standing, like both
Yeah, both
standing?
standing, both
Okay.
standing. Yep. So, and we train that a little bit in our defensive tactic courses. That the courses you go to now, they'll say a Kimura is your cop's best friend, and it's true. Like that Kimura Americana, like on the ground, if someone had a weapon in their hand, like it's invaluable. It's a great tool,
And you're talking
tremendous for police work.
the hand that you're doing the kimura on. If that has a weapon, then
Yeah,
that move is very effective. So if somebody had a knife or a gun, and you can put that hand in a kimura, then you're pretty much neutralizing that weapon.
yeah, and I mean, obviously, like a gun, like we don't, that depends on where the muzzle is and stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, like I use that as a loose example, but also just to gain compliance. Like if this guy's trying to, even if you're on the ground and he's flat on his back and he's trying to punch you or whatever, and you're able to just put that Americana in, and like, dude, like I mean, I'm sure you've felt that, right? Like it's absolutely horrible on your shoulder. Like I don't care who you are, especially for guys, because we don't usually carry that much pliability in that joint. So it's like
Right.
it but yeah, like if they did have a knife and you were down and you were able to plant that on, like and you're able to position your body to not get cut. I absolutely would consider that in that spot. So it's great for that. So so I have used that on basic things, but not in like I wouldn't say in a fight. But I did. So the first time I like really like hit like a good takedown at work was I was working in the evening shift, and this is in Manchester, and we got a call for a guy who was in the back of like at the time, I think it was like a Price Right type store at a shopping plaza. And they said he had a mask on over his face, and he was in the back of the store, like grabbing hammers and stuff. And he was kind of like pacing back and forth. So they were obviously thought that was kind of alarming, right? This guy had a ski mask over his face, and I think they suspected that he probably was considering robbing the store, which he probably was. So I went over to that, and I was the first one off there. And I remember when I walked in the door, he was walking toward the main entrance at the time, and he had a mask over his face. And I could see he still had a hand like in his pocket, like he was holding something. I didn't know if it was a weapon or what. And I was like, yeah, I told him like, hey, take your hand out of your pocket, take your hand out of your pocket. I probably should have pulled out my gun, but I didn't at the time. And I walked up to him, and I just kind of planted that, the hand that he had in his pocket. I like grabbed and like sandwiched it to his body. And I was like, I was going to like put him in handcuffs, and he like squared up to me, like almost like he was considering like throwing a punch or something. And I just immediately like buried my head in his chest and like hit like what I'd call like a high double takedown. And I took him to the ground inside of the store there. And from there, like he struggled. He wasn't a huge kid, but he struggled a little bit. I actually had a kind of a hard time getting his hands, but I just got heavy on him, like kind of knee on belly type stuff, and was able to yank his hands up. And I did lose because I took my cuffs out before I took him down, so my cuffs went like flying across the floor. So I ended up having to ask some bystander in the store to give me my handcuffs.
Oh, you were flying solo. I assumed you had backup. There was another guy there or something. But so you were by yourself.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have gone in by myself, but I did at the time. One of them got there after I got him in cuffs. Another officer showed up, but and he kept saying, he's like, "I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you." Like he kept like, the kid was only like 17 years old. I didn't know how old he was. He still had that mask on, and he did have he was holding a hammer. I didn't know it, and he had like concealed some hammer he found in the back of the store, and I think he was working his way to the front to probably going to rob it at the time. I think he was kind of working up the courage to do it. He was a young, he was a teenager. So, but that was like a time where like I, full on hit a takedown and was able to like kind of get heavy on him, dig his hands out, get him in cuffs, and use that kind of that ground fighting skill, by myself, one-on-one.
Yeah.
This is actually only like, I was a sergeant at the time. It was like 3 years ago. I was maybe a little less than that.
Okay.
I was working day shift.
Oh, another one. Oh, hang on real quick. So that was a double leg takedown. We're talking, that's like a wrestling takedown, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But you see it in jiu-jitsu too.
Right.
Because it's like a standing, it doesn't put you in too much of a risk of a guillotine or anything, because if you bury your head in the chest quick and take them down, it doesn't, you don't want to, you're not putting your head in a pocket, right, where someone can choke you easy.
Right. So, this is what I'm still trying to learn here. That's one of my biggest fears of trying to do a takedown is getting guillotined, but I got to work on that. It's one of the skills I got to work on
That's tough. Right now. It takes time.
Yeah, and obviously you know quite a bit about takedowns. So, all right, so the double leg take. I mean, that's awesome though. And so, but you were about to tell us about another one.
Yeah. So, and it was kind of similar in terms of what I used to take this guy down, but it was one of my coworkers, was in the it's called Elm Street. It's a main road in the downtown where all the businesses and restaurants are, and it was called out that there was a guy with a swinging a wrench around in the middle of the street, and he was like acting erratic. Like we sometimes would get calls like this I think he was smoking meth at the time. So,
oh, geez. Okay.
So the officer, he wasn't coming at the officer with the wrench, but he was super erratic. And the officer, I think, he got his taser out, and I think he was trying to get a deployment on him and wasn't able to. The guy ended up dropping the wrench, but he was running away from the officer, and I was close by. So I responded over, and I saw this guy. He was on the sidewalk, and he was running, trying to get to an intersecting street. And this is an example of a guy who was bigger. He was probably like 230 pounds, like a bigger guy. And I got out and I told him to get on the ground, and he didn't. And I could see his hands are empty at the time. So I kind of similarly, like I did that last one, like I came in for a high double and like buried my head in his chest and and took him down there. And when he went down, like he went on his back and he kind of like rolled to his stomach, and we were able to kind of dig in, get his hands, and a couple of other officers got there quick, and we put him in custody, but he was still struggling, but he didn't. That was the end of it. The takedown was a win.
It sounds like the takedowns are a big part of the win here, which is, I mean, so it's like that's a lot of the wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I always, that was my thing in wrestling too. Like I love to take people down. Like that was what I was best at. So I just stick with what I'm good at, right? Like if I'm in that spot, like I take someone down, and when you take someone down, like you take, it's demoralizing. It takes the fight out of you. Like your control, it doesn't feel good, especially you're on a concrete sidewalk or something.
Oh God, yeah.
And you get dumped on the ground. Like not only are you physically taking something out of them, but mentally you're beating them, right? Like you're establishing yourself as like the superior fighter. You know what I mean? And you gotta I believe in my control. You gotta control the initial point of attack. And any time. And if I get into a fight, regardless of the circumstance, if it gets to that level, I can, I do a little boxing on my own, but nothing like I have jiu-jitsu and wrestling, but I'm not going to stand and trade punches, right? Like, cause that's not, for one, it's not smart to do anyway in police work, but it's just not as sound. Like I stick to where I'm good. It doesn't look as bad. Like when you take someone down and you're digging for hands and stuff, it doesn't look as violent, right? To the public. Right. It doesn't look as bad
and that's a huge
camera.
Consideration these days, right? Because everything's being recorded, and the whole world could see what you're doing, 10 minutes after you do it. So it's for the optics for sure.
Right. So so it's so a lot of, and there's been a few of those over the years. And like I said, I have used, we do teach a lot with the jiu-jitsu. I've used some, control techniques and stuff, but I haven't been on my back ever, in a fight. Okay. So I haven't had to. I trained a ton of that. And even in the, with our law enforcement defensive tactics, I've trained a lot with fighting from your back and everything. But in a live scenario, I've never had to, never been on my back.
It doesn't sound easy to get you on your back, Dan.
Yeah, I'd like to think that if that happens, then I'd probably bet my match out there. But the good thing is that most of the people who train, probably 90-something% of them, right? They're not usually your guys out on the street fighting cops, thankfully. So they're usually well-adjusted, disciplined people who,
cops,
So, but that's a good thing. We don't want the people who train to be fighting with cops. So, and with that being said, 90-something% of the people that you're going to get in a fight with, they do not have the training usually.
Right.
They might have youth, size, things like that, and those are things you have to beat. But most of the time, they don't have the skill set. And if you have the right mindset and you're trained, like I think nothing of fighting a typical guy who's 225, 230 that doesn't train. I still think I could get the better of them, no problem, in my mind. I could be wrong, but in my mind, I tell myself that,
Right. No, that was going to be one of my questions too, but you've already like hit on most of my questions. So like, and you've done that too. It's not that you just know that, but you just use that example right now of that dude. And I'm sure you've got plenty of other examples in your time as a cop where you've had to take down dudes that are significantly bigger than you who aren't trained. And so you being trained, you know how to do that. Yeah. So what was I going to say? Oh yeah. A quick question is, I hear this stat out there and I don't know if you're probably familiar with it, but people who train jiu-jitsu and people who encourage people to train jiu-jitsu, there's this statistic that I'm not sure how accurate it is, something like 90% of fights go to the ground or something like that. And I don't know how true that is. But I mean, in your experience, obviously you take people directly to the ground, but like, have you seen and experienced or witnessed and that kind of thing? And would you say that's a relatively accurate statistic?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've heard that in official classroom settings too, and police training is something very similar to that stat. So, but yes, I absolutely think it's true because even with common street fights with people who don't train, they end up grabbing a hold of each other. They grab each other's shirts. They end up falling to the ground.
Uh-huh.
Like it. And very seldomly do you see two guys stand there and put up their dukes and just trade punches and never like it's
Right.
just that's like a made up fight scenario. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
very rarely actually happens. There's
Okay. Okay.
this I've heard it in an academic environment, and I would say for sure and really with cops fighting bad guys too. Like it usually ends up on the ground most of the time.
Right. And so you would definitely think that I know we've been going an hour and 15, which is awesome, but
Yeah.
and I do have a lightning round at the end, but right before we get to that, you were mentioning a little bit about you said it, in the old days there was that one black belt in New Hampshire and now there's
Yeah.
6 in one police department alone or something. Is that what you said?
Yeah, Nashua. So that's a city south of Manchester that's
Okay.
a little smaller than us, but the next biggest city in the state. And yeah, like I was talking to a guy who works there the other day, and they have like 6 jiu-jitsu black belts alone in that department who are cops. So
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like 6 black belt jujitsu instructors designated to a police department, but it's more like the cops themselves are black
yeah,
belts.
yeah, yeah. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah, I mean it's incredible how much the sport has evolved, and even in a small state like this, there's a ton of black belts now. So
Right. Right. And it's but I mean, do cops in New Hampshire now they're required to go through this like job specific training which includes jujitsu?
yeah, they in the what we call the police standards and training. That's the governing training for the state of New Hampshire. They have jujitsu oriented self-defense or defensive tactic instruction
Uh-huh.
at the academy. And then for us at Manchester, our recruits, we call them, when they come in, even beyond the academy, they have to do additional ones that are jujitsu based as well.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so they're getting, they're getting that little bit of instruction and experience, and then and it's always recommended, and kind of we always influence them as best we can to try to stick to it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I try to do that, and we do have some people that do. We're not as good as we should be, but if I can tell you right now, if I were a young officer, that would be my focus.
No kidding, right? And would
Yeah.
you even like? Would you say like with a gi, no gi? Would you have a preference if you were gonna, if you were in charge of telling officers, like if you were in charge of the program, would you say go train with a gi, go train with no gi, or
I would if I had yeah if I were asking my recommendation, I would say both probably, but
okay,
I don't I, I would be fine either way. If they're doing jujitsu, like that would whether it's gi, no gi, like I'm good either way. If you're doing it, that's that's uh that's good enough. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Ideally, I would say both because I do think there's a lot to say for knowing how to use clothing, and
okay,
here like New Hampshire's a cold weather winters and stuff, so you got people with coats on and stuff, right? Like you could choke,
yeah,
if you had to, you could choke somebody with a coat. You can use it for control points. There's a lot to be said for having that experience of using a gi.
okay, okay, got it. So, you ready for the lightning round?
Sure, yeah,
All right. Now, there's been a lot about wrestling versus jujitsu in here. So,
yeah.
and you did kind of say this earlier, but if somebody had one martial art, including wrestling, to learn, and that's all they had time for, wrestling or jujitsu.
Wrestling.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
That's the
I
Joe Rogan
kind of
response.
saw that coming.
You ever hear Joe Rogan say it was the best thing going into the UFC to have, or MMA? He says wrestling. So
Okay.
I'm gonna stick with his take. I kind of agree with him.
Okay. Gi, rash guard, or singlet?
Singlet,
Okay. Coffee or energy drinks?
coffee.
Okay. Favorite cop movie? If there is one.
I would say The Departed.
The Departed. Of course
Yeah.
you would say that, the New
Yeah.
England guy. Okay. More intense, a jujitsu competition or a high-speed pursuit?
Oh boy. I think a high speed pursuit. Yeah,
Okay.
it is a lot. I mean, totally different, but on the surface, I would say a high speed pursuit.
All right. Favorite submission?
My favorite is I like a if it's a gi on, I'll have like a paper cutter type choke that I do from north south.
Okay.
And yeah, I use that a lot, and that's my go-to. So I'd say that one.
Okay. We may have already covered this, but most underrated skill a cop should have.
Yeah, and then it's what we talked about. I hate to say it like it because it might not be underrated on this platform, but it's underrated in general society. So I'm going to say the grappling background
Okay.
and
All
continued
right.
training.
Okay. Last one. Who would win in a fight? You, Tom, or Brian? These are your brothers for our listeners.
Brian's got he's got the most training. He's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, and he's got the striking. So he would work me probably.
Right. And did I hear, I think your brother Tom told me one time that Brian, I don't know if he still can, but at one point could bench press close to 500 pounds.
You know what? I didn't know he was close to that much if he was, but he is super strong for his size. So I wouldn't be surprised, but I didn't think he was at that level. I didn't hear that.
Okay.
So
So
he does tell
questionable.
me he can do like 40 pull-ups in a row or something, which
Oh my God.
to me is like an extraordinary number. I
Yeah.
don't get anywhere near that. So,
Right.
it wouldn't surprise me because there's nobody that works out as hard as he does. He's a maniac.
Yeah, right. Well, okay, Dan, I guess we're at the end. I knew there'd be plenty to talk about. I knew it. I
Yeah.
absolutely knew it. And we didn't even get to your jujitsu competitions, which I'm
I
bummed
know.
about. But
Well, I can come back on. There's more to talk about someday if you want to do another one. So
I'd love to, man. So thanks so much for coming on. And I'm gonna hit stop, but don't leave the meeting yet. All right.
okay, sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.